you thinking for the?
My guest today played in one of the biggest upsets and in what is generally considered one of the greatest games in Silver Streaks basketball history. Yes, history. Scott Kelley, part of the Campbell and Kelley Twin Towers duo that starred for the Streaks in the mid-1970s, helped lead the Galesburg boys basketball team to an improbable 85-79 overtime win over undefeated and number one ranked Peoria Richwoods before a really packed house in the 1976 regional championship game in the GHS gym. We'll definitely dig into the Richwoods game, as it's called, during our interview. The Streaks went on to win the sectional and super sectional before falling 53-48 to eventual 1976 Class A state champion Chicago Morgan Park in a state quarterfinal game at the Assembly Hall in Champaign. Scott went on to play 2 years for the Iowa Hawkeyes before transferring his junior and senior years, where he played at the University of Evansville. But as much as we all remember Scott as number 30 and 31 for the Silver Streaks, he's done his share of impressive things post-basketball. Scott is a professor of marketing and the executive associate dean in the Gatton College of Business and Economics at the University of Kentucky. Specializing in sports marketing, Scott earned the distinction of being among the top 2% of scientists worldwide as measured by impact of their research publications. He joins me today from Lexington, Kentucky, where he lives with his wife, Pat. Scott, welcome to Galesburg in Focus.
Thanks, Jay. It's good to see you.
Yeah, good to talk to you. So before we dig into the quote Richwoods game, as it's known, how probable was it that you were even playing a key role in that game? I believe you might have been the last person to make the team at Churchill your 8th grade year. And then I think maybe started one game as a 9th grader. So I think you had a little bit of a growth spurt before your sophomore year.
I did.
Is that kind of what sparked? I mean, is that kind of like what took you to the next level?
Yeah, I think I took some of the old sayings of the Morgan brothers, the Coach Bob and Coach Bill, and I always remembered them saying that what teams are made between October and March, and players are made between March and October. And I really took that to heart, even, and I was the last guy on the team in 8th grade, and I think I scored 4 free throws the whole season. Never scored a basket, and then grew a little bit in 9th grade and played a little bit more, a little bit. I wasn't a starter by any stretch. And then I grew 5 inches basically over the summer between my 9th grade and sophomore years. I kind of left 9th grade as a 6-footer and came back started at GHS as a sophomore, 6'5". And yeah, I mean, that's my story.
I don't know how much summer basketball organized that there was, but maybe the coaches were a little surprised that you came back 5 inches taller your sophomore year.
Yeah, you could play. I don't know if they still do it, but they had open gym in the summer, and the players would. It wasn't just the players, but guys would come and play. And I'm guessing Coach Owens kind of knew, and I think. I never asked him this, but I think Coach Owens, the seniors that were on the team that year, guys like Joe Swedlin and Mark Wilson, those guys kind of just made sure I got to play that summer. I'm not sure I deserved to play, but I was there every day. Mm-hmm. And so I got to play, and they kind of made sure I got to play in the pickup games. And that was actually a really, really good learning.
Where were you playing during the summer?
At the high school.
Okay.
In the high school gym.
Okay.
There's probably rules that you can't do that at this point. I don't know.
At least a certain amount of contact days or whatever. But
yeah.
Before we leave Churchill, kind of talk about, you mentioned Coach Bob and Coach Bill. How did they develop you as a basketball player?
Well, for one, they both gave me an opportunity, especially in 8th grade when you're the last guy or more or less on the team. It's sort of a crapshoot as to whether you made the team even. But I think they were both really, really good teachers. They were good coaches, but they taught the game really well. And I know when I was playing in 8th grade basketball, I never played any of the YMCA basketball. I mean, literally the first team I was ever on was in 8th grade. And so I didn't know what a pick and roll was. I didn't, none of that stuff. And Coach Bob and Coach Bill had a way of, helping you understand stuff, but not making you feel like you were way behind the other guys that had been doing all that stuff all along.
Mhm.
Just a lot of patience, a lot of encouragement, and they were both of them very instrumental in not just my basketball, but in my life.
Right. This is Jay Redfern. I'm talking to Scott Kelley, the former Galesburg basketball star who helped lead the 1976 Streaks to state. So, who were some of your Streaks heroes growing up in Galesburg?
I was thinking about this morning. My family moved to Galesburg in I think the fall of '68. So the first teams I can kind of remember were the Reuben Triplett, Zach Thiel. That team is kind of the first team that was around when I was in Galesburg. So um, I wasn't, there's other guys that I played with that had lived in Galesburg their whole life, and like a guy like Steve Cheeseman that knows the whole history of
Yeah,
sports
right.
at the school. But I wasn't like that, so I didn't really have that kind of a background of it. But I still kind of remember the first year I lived in Galesburg when we got out of school because the basketball team was going to the state tournament. And I never heard of such a thing. I
Yeah.
thought that's kind of cool. Uh,
So, were there any regrets that you didn't get to play for John Thiel, or what was it like to play for Coach Owens?
I like playing for Coach Owens. I mean, I went to the Thiel camps growing up. I did that every summer. So I've been around Coach Thiel. Um, I, I remember him being around the high school for the first couple months, maybe that I was a sophomore. I'd see him in the hallways, and I think he remembered me from the camps, I guess. Um, Coach Owens was great. I mean, he gave me all kinds of opportunities, and so I don't really have a basis of comparison of regretting not playing for Coach Steele. I just don't have that experience. But my experience playing for Coach Owens was a good one, and he gave me opportunities. I was played on varsity. I didn't play a lot, but I practiced with the varsity my entire sophomore year, and then of course played as a junior and senior.
Okay. So, who was your coach your sophomore year as the sophomore coach?
The coach we had for sophomores was Donnie Wright,
Okay.
and then he kind of doubled up as the sophomore coach, and then also helped with the varsity.
Okay. Before we fast forward to your senior season, tell me about your junior year, both as a team and individually. I mean, could you have ever projected going from 75 to 76? I think that you guys ended like what 103-51 loss to Richwoods your junior year.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
Yeah. So what was that
Um,
junior year like?
excuse me. Junior year was we were young. We were really young, and I don't think we didn't have a senior on the team by the time we were maybe a third or half the way through the season. There were no seniors on the team, so we were all juniors, and then several sophomores got brought up and played as well. And um, we took our lumps at times. I remember there were points in time during that season where people were concerned that we were going to be the first sub 500 streaks team in, I don't know, it was like 45 years or some huge number. And we ended up being above 500 despite that last game. But the last game, was Richwoods 50 points better than us? Maybe not, but the whole thing just unraveled. Um, and it just got out of control. Um, but it was a good motivation for the next year, actually.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. So let's talk about the Richwoods game. Regional championship against undefeated number one team with two All-Staters in Derek Holcomb and Mark Smith. But you guys were no fluke either. I think you guys were 23-3 entering that in that game.
Yeah.
So what was practice like that week? Practice around school, around town, leading up to that game. Did you guys feel any pressure, or was it really you didn't have anything to lose?
I think it was more the latter and didn't have anything to lose. I think we expected to win. We expected to compete. We had played them earlier in the year in, early December, I think. And I think we ended up losing by 10 or so, but it was kind of a one or two basket game going down the stretch, and then they ended up shooting free throws and ended up beating us by 10. In a way, that might have been a blessing in disguise because if we had won that game, I think the next one would have been,
Yeah.
would have been amped up even more. I don't know. I mean, I think our team, I think we all believed we could win that game. I'm not sure folks around town felt the way we did, but as you said earlier, it was a packed gym. It was an amazing environment for a high school basketball game.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. So, what do you remember about the atmosphere that night? I was there. It was electric. Were you able to take that in at all, or were you strictly focused on the game?
Probably not during the game, but things I remember, like after the game around the crowd, I remember the court getting rushed, and which was that was kind of cool. And um, the other thing I remember, this is not crowd oriented, but the other thing I remember is I think Derek Holcomb fouled out maybe on the last play of the first half, or very close to the end of not first half, excuse me, the regulation.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time I realized that he had fouled out was when we got ready to do the tip for overtime. And he wasn't there to do the jump ball with me. And that was when I was like, oh, he's out. And it just felt a little different. He was a kind of a force
Yeah.
at that time.
So, if I remember right, you guys probably should have won the game in regulation.
Yeah.
How did the game go towards the end?
We made a couple, as I recall, we made a couple turnovers at the end, and they caught up kind of on a more or less a last second shot. Um, and I think, but it was I think it was just meant to be that way. I mean,
Yeah.
it was a great game. We had actually built a pretty big lead in the first half, as I recall, and they came back, they came storming back, and as we probably thought they would, and but then in overtime, we managed to pull it out.
I think they undefeated the year before also, or they
I
were really
don't
good. I
know if
mean,
they went to state the year before. I'm not sure if they were undefeated or not.
could
But
you sense at all that they were saying, "Oh, we're in for a game here," or did you think they knew going in that you guys would challenge them?
that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, they were a dominant number one team in the state. I mean, they did not play a lot of close games throughout the year, as I recall. And I mean, it's hard to get inside their heads, but I'm
Yeah.
guessing they assumed they were going to win that game, the game against us, and um, but it just wasn't meant to be.
How important do you think the home court advantage was that game?
I think it was huge. I mean, we had a great crowd. We had great crowds our whole senior year. I mean, you think about it now. We played to pretty full gyms throughout our conference season for sure. I mean, the Western Big Six at the time, every place we went, and it wasn't just us. I mean, it was a great conference and drew great crowds for high school basketball, and it was just a really, really great time to be playing high
Yeah.
school basketball.
This is Jay Redfern. I'm talking to Scott Kelley, the former Galesburg basketball star who helped lead the 76 Streaks to state. So, how important was it to get to Champaign and show that win wasn't a fluke? I mean, there's been teams that have won big games like that, and then the next game they turn
Yeah.
around and lose. I mean, it probably had to be pretty important to make it
Yeah,
all
I
the way.
mean, we jumped the big hurdle pretty much right out of the gate in the regional finals, but we certainly didn't want that to be the thing we hung our hat on. And so we played some good teams going into the tournament. The super sectional was against Moline over in Wharton Field, or not Wharton Field House, but over at
Robertson.
Bradley.
Yeah.
I'm drawing a blank on the name.
Robertson Fieldhouse.
Robertson Field House.
Yeah.
Played against my college roommate, Jimmy Hallstrom was on Moline. He was their best player. And so fortunately I had bragging rights and still do. With him, we beat them 3 times our senior year. But he was a great player.
Did you ever talk to any players on the Richwoods team in the years following that game?
Um, I saw Mark Smith one summer. I was doing a summer job working for Lindstrom's downtown, and I had to drive over to Peoria, and I ran into him, and we just talked briefly. But I actually would see Bill Holcomb. No, Bill.
Very cool.
Yeah, no. There was a point guard, Bill Hostad, I think was his
Okay.
name. He went to Iowa, so I'd see him on campus once in a while. But other than that, no, I've never really. I think Derek Holcomb also had a career in academia and was I think he might be retired now, but he was at Eastern Kentucky University, which is,
Yeah.
20 miles down the road from me, but I've never really caught up with him.
So where would you say that game ranks among all the games that you've played in? The
The
Richwoods game?
Richwoods game,
Yeah.
I mean, it was the highlight. I mean, it was an amazing event. I mean, I played that game with guys I grew up with, that many of them are still my, good friends, and just the environment around it was amazing. The excitement in the town, and then that flowed out of that. I
What
think that's it.
Why do you think that game has endured the test of time? I mean, people still talk about the Richwoods game. It wasn't the tournament, it was only the regional, but that is still like one of the top games ever in
Yeah.
Galesburg history.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, there were several, like there were 4 players on the court that played in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Derek Holcomb went to IU and then transferred to Illinois. Mark Smith went to Illinois. Mike went to Northwestern, and then I started at Iowa. So, I mean, that in and of itself makes the situation pretty unique. But it was a really good game. I think it went back and forth, and like I said earlier, the environment was crazy. There were a bunch of college coaches in the gym. Apparently, I didn't see
Yeah,
any
Lou
of
Henson
them.
was there at the game, so
Yeah, I've heard
yeah.
that there were a lot of college coaches there. Um, but yeah, I don't know how does folklore, like, it almost gains a momentum in and of itself, right?
Yeah, it does, really does. So you guys advanced to Champaign and draw Chicago Morgan Park in the quarterfinals. Were you confident going into that game, and what led you to fall short? I mean, it was a pretty close game.
It was a close game. We didn't play very well, I don't, as I recall. I think that at halftime it was a really low score, maybe 19-17 or something like that. But we did not play very well. I'd like to think we were the best team there that year, but we didn't win. But we lost Friday night. The other thing that was going on at that point in time was that I think, if I remember correctly, there was a stretch there where the public league team out of Chicago was winning the state tournament kind of year over year. And so we kind of ran into that, just that aura, I guess I'll
Yeah,
say, around that.
yeah. And then
Um,
I guess Morgan Park was led by Levi Cobb. What do you remember? Was he pretty much a dominant in that game, or how did you see the game?
I think he played well. I think they had another big guy, Eric Bowman was his name, and I actually ended up playing against him in college. He was at the University of Hawaii, and when I was at Evansville, we played against them. I talked to him a little bit there. But yeah, Levi Cobb was a player. I think they had a guard, maybe Laird Smith was his name.
Right? Yeah, I remember him.
And that was kind of, as I recall, their big three. They were a good team. Eric Bowman, I think, made some shots, and uh, we kind of did a little rally, I think, late, but fell short. It was disappointing.
Yeah, how disappointing. Obviously, it's disappointing, but what was the feeling after that game?
Yeah, I think we were pretty disappointed. I think we thought we'd beaten the number 1 team in the state, and we kind of felt like we probably should have won Friday night. I remember the next day, so Saturday, we stayed and watched some of the games, and I remember I was going to do an interview with the WGIL guys, and I was sitting there waiting just sitting there waiting by the radio desk and looking down, and that's when it kind of hit me, like watching the teams play and thinking like we probably were better than these guys I'm watching play right now, but we were out, and I mean that was kind of when it really hit me.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's a thrill. You always remember getting there, but I guess you kind of want to at least win that first game so you get two more the next
Yeah,
day.
yeah,
Yeah. So I'm 5 years younger than you. And just like, players like Ruben Triplett and Zach Thiel were your heroes, you and Mike Campbell were my heroes. And, I wanted to be like you guys. How do you explain the celebrity status of that accompanied being a Silver Streak when you were growing up?
it's crazy, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah.
I mean, we were high school kids, and I think the I think the aura around the program, kids that grew up in Galesburg grew up with that aura, that sense about the program, and um, it was a seemingly reachable dream, I guess, for kids. I mean, I remember getting to Galesburg, and after a year or so, I mean, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to play. I wanted to, play high school basketball, and yeah, I don't. I'm guessing some of it is timing. I think I often think about I grew up at a really, really good time.
Hmm.
Um, it was a good time. I had some really, really good teammates, really, really good friends. And it was a great experience.
I've heard you say that, when you're talking with people, from Kentucky, you kind of say that your high school experience as a Silver Streak was kind of similar to what maybe a player at UK has gone through, but in a small town way.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, the magnitude of the UK experience is obviously way, way bigger and way
Right.
greater.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways it was. I mean, we were the game in town, if you will, in Galesburg, and here in Lexington, the game in town is UK basketball. So I think obviously, again, the magnitude is so much different, but there are some similarities, I think. Yeah.
What was the recruiting process like for you? What were your options and how did you end up at Iowa?
Mm, so the visits I did, excuse me, the visits I did, I visited Marshall University. I visited Ole Miss, visited St. Louis U, Western Kentucky, and Iowa. Those were the ones. And I had gone to a basketball camp at Iowa after my junior year, so I was a little bit familiar with the folks over there. Um, and it was the Big Ten.
Yeah.
I mean, the other schools were, and the other school was Texas A&M. I visited Texas A&M too, which was a long way from home for a kid growing up in Galesburg. But
Who was the coach at Iowa at the time?
Lute Olson
Lute
was
Olson
the
was he was
coach.
there then.
Yeah,
Okay.
he was my freshman year, I believe, was maybe his third year there.
Okay.
And yeah, it ended up being a good experience. I had I broke my foot in the summer between my freshman and sophomore year, and it just honestly made the sophomore year really difficult, with the injury, um, and then had the opportunity to go to Evansville.
Yeah. Well, how did that kind of come about?
So the University of Evansville entire basketball team was killed in a plane tragedy
Right.
in December 13th, 1977. And so that would have been, kind of partway through my sophomore year. And um, my it's kind of a fun story, I guess. My dad knew the president of DuPage Community College, which is where Dick Walters, who was the coach at Evansville, came from. So after that's who they hired after the plane tragedy. And so that was how I got connected to Evansville. That was sort of my entree. And went down there, visited. Um, in a lot of ways at the time, Evansville, University of Evansville basketball the city kind of revolved around it during the scene. You can imagine after the plane tragedy,
Yeah.
it was, you know, even more. Um, and it was a very good experience. I had a great experience there. I probably wasn't really able or didn't try to process the magnitude of it at the time. I know at the time I didn't for sure, and it was multiple years later, but before you stop and you think about, you know, what that entire city and that really small
Right.
campus was coming out of. And we just all showed up, you know,
Yeah.
and here we are. Went at it.
Yeah. This is Jay Redfern. I'm talking to Scott Kelley, the former Galesburg basketball star who helped lead the Streaks to state in 1976. So we've mentioned Mike Campbell several times. I'm not sure there's really been a better 1-2 punch than you guys, especially, you know, a big man 1-2 punch. What made Mike such a good player?
Mike was good. He had a great work ethic. He and we spent a lot of time together. One of the things that we did was we played, I think it's Covenant Church over, it's off
On
Fremont
Jefferson.
Street,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
And there's a basketball court there. And I remember between our junior and senior years, we played pickup game, two-on-two pickup games. As Mike and I, and then Joe Swedlin, who had just finished his freshman year at SMU, and Ian Davies, who was actually a great player
Right.
that became even greater after high school. He was at Graceland, and we played basically every day, two-on-two. And I still remember the first day we started that summer. We kind of said, "Well, you know, who are the teams? Let's make them even. One college guy, one high school guy on each team," and they were having none of that. And so we took a pounding for a while. And
Yeah.
we had two college guys that had a year of college under their belt, but it was so good for us. It was so good for us. It was really good competition, but we also played together. And Mike and I, you know, we we got better together. But he had a great work ethic, good shooter, you know.
I was going to say back in the time, you know, it was close to 6'10", but he could play facing the basket too.
Yeah, yeah. He did some in high school and then even more in college. He had a good outside jump shot, strong post player, you know, had a hook shot. I remember his hook shot. But yeah, it, he was he was a good friend, and still is, and he was great to play with.
Talk about some of the other players on your 76 team.
Other players, Ransberry was the other forward, and Rance was out in Oregon. Um, Carl Finley was our two guard, and then he was a junior. So and then Michael Wilder was our point guard. So Michael, and Carl were both juniors. They were a year younger than Mike and I. And then we had Eric Doss coming off the bench. Eric played a critical role in that Richwoods game.
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, we would probably not have won that game without some of his contributions in that game. Bill Dwyer was a big guy. Mark Brown, another big guy. I said Jay Stone maybe already.
Hmm.
Jimmy Pogue played. Um, Putting me on the spot, Jay.
Probably one of the taller teams that Galesburg's ever had.
Yeah, we had four guys that were kind of 6'6", 6'7" or better.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all good players. I mean, all four of the. I mean, Mike and I started, but even the two guys that didn't start were really good players.
Okay. So you graduated from Evansville and basketball is over. How did you end up getting in the world of college academia and specifically marketing?
So I worked for a couple years and then decided I might want to coach. And so I went over to Western Illinois,
Hmm.
and I got my MBA, and I had a graduate research assistantship in the marketing department. And then was a grad assistant coach. And I love the coaching part or the teaching part of coaching. And but there were other parts of it that were kind of a grind for me. So I thought, well, maybe teaching. So I went and taught at a community college at Highland Community College up in Freeport.
Okay.
Taught there for a year. I was a pretty quiet kid in class and never said much. And I kind of wanted to see if I could stand up in front of a class and actually do a lecture.
Yeah.
And I made it through it. And then I came down to the University of Kentucky and got my doctorate after that 1 year at Highland. But yeah, that's kind of how that happened. And it's been a good career for me. I've enjoyed it a lot.
What do you like so much about the marketing part?
Being in academia, I don't teach as much now because I'm doing administrative stuff, but I love teaching. Um, and so I've done that for years and years. I love the teaching. I love staying connected to some of my students. I still talk to some of my students from 30 years ago even, which is kind of cool to see them grow and evolve. I've been in a spot where I've been at Kentucky so long where I've had the sons or daughters of my former students in my class,
Okay.
which is kind of an interesting
Yeah.
experience. And then on the research side, I don't do as much research now, but just exploring new ideas and that whole process I found very fulfilling and very interesting.
Okay. Let's finish with a little rapid fire round. I'm going to say something. You give me your first thought. Okay.
Okay.
So Galesburg.
Galesburg, great place to grow up.
Okay. Silver Streaks.
Great tradition, instrumental in my life.
Mike Campbell.
Good friend, good teammate. And I'm glad he and I got to do the ride together through high school.
Mike Owens.
Good coach that got me opportunities that I might not have had otherwise. I think one of the things Coach Owens did that maybe people questioned at the time was he allowed Mike Campbell and I to play out on the floor a little bit, which was actually really helpful to both of us in our college careers.
Unsung hero on the 76 Streaks.
I'm going to go Eric Doss on the strength of that Richwoods game.
Okay. Best high school player you ever played against and best college player you ever played against.
Ooh. The guy that gave us the most fits our senior year was Jimmy Hallstrom at Moline. I think we played them 3 times and he had 26, 30, and 36 against us. And then for college,
yeah.
I mean, I went through, I'm kind of uniquely positioned in that when I was at Iowa, we played against Magic Johnson. When I was at Evansville, we played against Larry Bird.
Oh, wow.
And so that's kind of, like hitting the daily double. And
yeah.
From that era, I guess those guys I'd have to say were the two.
Yeah, that's kind of a no-brainer on those two guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about favorite gym that you played in other than Galesburg, and then also the favorite collegiate arena?
I like going down to Quincy. I'm probably one of the few guys that can, and some of my teammates as well, that never lost in the Quincy gym. When I was a sophomore and didn't play much, when Joe Sweedland and Mark Wilson and those guys were playing, we won at Quincy. We won at Quincy my junior year, but lost at home, and then we won down there my senior year. That was always a fun gym, the Blue Devil Magic and all that.
Yeah. How about favorite GHS teacher or teachers? Do you have one or two that kind of stand out?
I had a really good experience with Mr. Patterson and Mr. DeVore. They did this team talk class that ran over 2 periods, and that was a good experience because there was really a kind of a neat community around that classroom that they fostered and developed. and then of course we spent time together. This is a quick bit of trivia, but Coach Massey's classroom was literally right across the hall from that class.
Okay.
So
And he was
back in the
just starting
day.
out. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was just starting.
Yeah. 1,000 wins later, 1,000
Yeah.
plus wins later. Yeah. If I wouldn't have been a college professor, I would have been.
Ooh. I don't know. I mean, I might have tried coaching. I'm not sure. I think I would have enjoyed coaching. But yeah, I think I found what I needed to do in my life. I mean, I've loved my career. Um, I love, what I do. I love the seasonality of an academic career. I mean, I get Christmas break, campus is
Yeah.
closed. I don't know what else I would have done.
Okay. And that wraps up my conversation with former Streaks basketball star and so much more, Scott Kelley. It's truly been a thrill to get to interview one of my boyhood heroes. So, Scott, thank you for joining me today on Galesburg in Focus.
Jay, it's been my pleasure.
Okay. Thank you.